Staying on now on the Weekend Prime here on Newsroom Africa, Channel 405. We continue with your reporting and that conversation I told you about earlier on. We bring that to you now. Evangelist Pastor Angus Buchan making headlines last week for his remarks captured in an audio recording that only Jewish and Afrikaans people shared a covenant with God. The audio clip was shared by EFF Deputy President Floyd Shivambu on his Twitter page of Buchan convening a prayer meeting called Stand Up for Jesus, Stand Up for Jesus. Evangelist Pastor Angus Buchan has apologized to the nation for his remarks. Now to talk further on this, we are in studio with Pastor Khoza. He is from the Khoza ministries and Ubuntu in Christ Church, as well as Pastor Caesar Molebatsi of the Ebenezer Evangelical Church. Gentlemen, it's good to have you both with us here.
Thank you.
It's a very difficult question to ask because you and I sitting here both know that we have no choice but to forgive because that's what we are called to do. But here's an apology that has been given following the intervention of the forum of believers to the statements made by Evangelist Angus. Is then the fruit that we look for in this repentance is a question that we want to ask. But let's start here. Christians are saying believers should stop being apologetic and stand for what they believe. If they believe that statement that was made by Angus Buchan is racist, they should say so and stand behind it.
I've encountered when I looked at what has been in the media and so on is that, first of all, what is he, by the way, asking for forgiveness for? Right. What is he sorry about? Is it because he has injured people with what he believes to be true, so he's sorry for having injured people? Is that the case? If that is so, then I think the problem is much deeper, because then it is not just really about injuring people with the truth, but it is about holding on to a false notion that has informed the missiological paradigm that says that the revelation of God and the relationship with God is only mediated through certain nations, particularly the Jews, and therefore it means there is no understanding of the Abrahamic promise and covenant, as well as the Afrikaners. Are really the ones who are carrying the truth. Now that is a major problem, which needs to be unfurled and explained further.
Pastor Dick, you were at that dialogue, at that intervention in the room, and I don't know. You will tell me whether you agreed on that statement that he was going to read and what that statement contains. And I read it. I read it over again moments ago. It's titled, Causing Unintentional Pain and Misunderstanding. I apologize, I repent, and I renounce the idea of any special nation. I look at it, I'm saying there's one thing that's probably missing and which is really key here is I apologize for making a racist statement.
Yep.
Well, it depends. But let me say that, well, in the spirit of Ubuntu and Christianity, if somebody asks for forgiveness, you do forgive him. I was in that meeting, and I did see Ubaba Angus is sorry about what he said. However, one of the things that I highlighted was what he said has got some political implications.
Yeah.
And forgiveness is instant, but the restoration is the process. I think that's what he must go through. But I think, he is sorry about it. But as to say whether he should confess the way we want him to confess, I'm not sure whether it will be the right way to demand it. Because what if maybe that's how he has been raised?
Yeah.
And maybe he has believed that all along.
You see, the next part of it is, he says, I honestly believe that the people that I was speaking to were suffering just like I was suffering, because I'm also a farmer, and they are frustrated in this drought. And I wanted to give them a message to alleviate their suffering and to remind them that God will never leave them. But then you take that message and you direct it to a particular nation because this particular nation has got a covenant with God. Just how does he explain that?
No, I think from what I heard from him, I think that was totally wrong from him. He doesn't know where it came from, but he's sorry about it. But I think in the Bible, God does call people to specific people or to address specific situation. Unfortunately, in this instant, by just saying the Afrikaner, who are also part of the Gentiles in the Bible, maybe the Jews, biblically, we can follow that, but the Afrikaner and the black people and other races, we are all Gentiles, so how he chose one group, I'm not sure there.
I think the problem here, the elephant in the room, is this a sign of latent racism?
Yes.
That declares one nation superior over the others because they've got a favored status with God? And I think that's the nub of the question you're asking. Is this really having to do with the upbringing that we've had over the 400 years that shows that the conqueror who has written the history is actually superior than anyone else? Therefore, because they've got the covenant with God, when they suffer, them not being the only farmers, I'm a farmer,
yeah.
I know what drought does.
Yeah.
And it affects me in the same way that it affects any other farmer,
yeah.
whether he's African or Umtonsund or he's white. It does. We know that. But because he was claiming a special status for a particular race, not even ethnic group, but race group, was there racism? Is there the dying kicks of the racist horse in South Africa that is now being evidenced within the Church of Jesus Christ? That to me is the concern that I have.
Is it being evidenced now? I'll tell you why. The African transformation movement,
Yes.
writing to Parliament, I don't want to misquote them here, I want to read exactly what they're saying. They are saying, we have noted with great concern the racially divisive statement made by Angus Buchan in an attempt to rally support for his upcoming Afrikaans-only meeting at Loftus Stadium. And then they go on to say, we interpret what he's done as abuse of religion and direct infringement on the pillars of the democracy we so passionately fought for. And therefore, they're calling for an inquiry into that statement and why he made it, but also for the CRL to actually mete out a just punishment.
Yes. Well, first of all, I think it's important to not limit this discussion just to Angus Buchan, because Angus as an individual, he's done tremendous things. He's gotten hundreds of thousands of people out to go and pray for rain in the Western Cape, etc., etc. So I think the issue now should be a little bit beyond Angus to say, is there something beyond what he's saying that is causing the kinds of rifts that we see in all spheres of our life and society, whether it be in our politics or whether it be in our church? We still know that Sunday morning is the most segregated time in South Africa, actually in most places around the world. Is that something that we need to deal with? Secondly, does this kind of latent or innate belief system actually engenders or encourages that people should actually claim this superiority over others in a way that spills out in terms of ownership of land, in terms of ownership of resources, in terms of ownership of IP, intellectual property? Is this the case? And if it is, how do we deal with it? So I think we must understand it to be going a little bit beyond Angus. Now,
Is it really latent? If you ask the African Transformation Movement, they say this is a message that probably is being preached every Sunday in certain communities, and therefore it leads to people honestly believing that this is the gospel truth.
Yeah, I think one of the things, having been in a multiracial church, I think, well, we never dealt with racism as an ideology. So when we became Christians, we just became born again, and these things were lying dormant. So they have got a way of coming out at the wrong places. So I think it's a wake-up call for the church, not only about racism, also about cultural issues. We have got a lot of problems here. But as a charismatic, I know some of these things, even as black people. When we're born again, we say just get over it and move on.
Right.
So even though we're Christians, we're not homogeneous in terms of how we believe in the Bible. But for me, it's a wake-up call for us.
Yeah.
Probably we could start something that can bring churches to talk about this.
But a broader conversation, looking at Deuteronomy 7, for example, is maybe or not preachers should have a conversation about some of these verses in the Bible that are a little bit problematic that people can actually use to promote certain ideas of division.
Well, I think that is very key and that's very, very important. But I want to go back to your question to say, is it really latent? Or is there active promotion of superiority of one race over against the other? And that is manifested, but first of all, in the theologizing that we do when we are talking to the people on the pew. Are we really dealing with them and promoting the kind of situation where God is not reduced to a real estate agent that gives people the right to occupy land? And I won't go into the Middle East, but here in South Africa, and in the political sense, it's hidden under property rights. Yes. But what it actually means is something else, and it's very, very different. So it is much more robust than we think. I think he meant well. Let's not make a mistake. But the point is that his point of departure was faulty because he cried out for his people, the Afrikaner people. Yeah. But he does that on the basis of a faulty theology that presupposes that Africa never had any understanding or knowledge of God.
So as we wrap it up, is the right question to ask, should his apology be accepted?
Well, look, in terms of forgiveness, if a person comes to me and says, even before they come, by the way, from my own personal experience, before the white person came and apologized, which he never did, for what he did to me on the 24th of December, 1964, even before he does, as a Christian, I learned to forgive, okay? But then when they come to me, there has to be an honesty and a transparency for me to be able then to execute what should happen after I've said, yes, actually, I do forgive you. But you see, if I talk apartheid language, when somebody has got his economic boot on my neck and says, oops, I am really sorry about this. So get the boot off my neck, then we can talk. But in the meantime, I feel pity for you because what you're doing because of ignorance, because of lack of spirituality, because of lack of understanding who God actually is in terms of the nation.
Pastor Caesar, Project, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Caesar Molebatsi there and Dick Khoza helping us through that conversation. Let's take a break. We'll continue with your reporting after this.